Hey everybody. Okay, so today I'm going to let you know about the shell. Okay, so what is the shell? What is that? Uh, Shell is actually a generic term to describe an interface with your computer. Okay, um, something that talks to your computer. Okay, when talking about Linux or other Unix-like system, okay, usually the shell refers to the command line interface, the CLI. The command line interface most people are familiar with is DOS, okay, like in Windows, right? There are actually several CLI shells that are common. However, in most Unix Linux systems, the shell is referred to as bash. Okay, that's the most common one. And that means born again shell, like Jason Bourne, Bourne. Okay. Um, there's many different names for the shell, such as the terminal, the command line, or the command prompt. Okay, each name for the shell loosely implies which operating system it's being run on, okay? So such as the command prompt for Windows, okay, or the terminal for Mac, okay? So in order to understand what the shell is and why it's important, one must understand the role of something called the kernel. And we're not talking about KFC, good chicken. No, we're talking about, the kernel. Okay, basically all hardware needs some form of software to allow users to interact with it, right? Right. So the kernel is the base, okay, for this software and controls what programs access each piece of hardware, okay, at a given time. So for example, if two programs want access to the processor, the kernel determines which program gets access first and who has to wait, okay? So essentially the kernel is the heart of the operating system, okay? So while most users will interact with software that will interact with the kernel, users like a GUI, like a graphical user interface, okay? Users sometimes need the full power of the operating system and they need to communicate directly with it. And the shell allows the user to cut out the middleman, that graphical user interface, and communicate directly with that kernel, okay? And as we said, the kernel is the base for software and controls what programs get access to each piece of hardware, okay? So as mentioned, the shell allows the user to cut out that middleman, okay, the GUI, and communicate directly with the kernel. So now you have a basic understanding of what the shell is. It's kind of time to understand how to use it. Okay, so a key concept to understand while using the shell is that there are two distinct user types, okay? The first user to understand is the root user. It's very similar to the administrator account in Windows, and it has full power over the operating system. And the root user can add users, it can configure the computer, and it's basically, the person that controls everything. Okay, all other users on the system are regular or standard users. Okay, and they have limited access to the shell, but they can still enjoy many of the features that the shell has to offer. Okay, so as most users are standard users, one has got to understand how to obtain, user access. Okay, so in the shell, a normal user has a $sign, okay, right before the area where they input commands, whereas the root user, which is the administrator, okay, has a hashtag, okay. And one way to gain access is to switch users, okay? So in order to switch users in a shell, you're going to need to type SU, okay, and then the user you want to switch to, okay. So you're going to see a lot of something called sudo, okay, and sudo is basically, you're going to see this a lot when you want to go get programs, install programs. It's basically you're switching to the administrator, so you have administrator access to install these programs or to make these the bigger changes, okay? Whereas standard users can't do this, okay? So anyways, as we mentioned, the shell is called bash, right? Born again shell. There are a lot of, as with DOS, okay, there are a lot of commands that you use to communicate directly with the kernel, all right, and some of those we're going to be going over this semester, and that way you'll be able to, we're going to be able to find out what those commands mean, and we're going to be seeing how we can actually use them. Okay, so I just wanted to give you a little overview about what the shell is. Just remember, it's a generic term for any interface with your computer. Okay, so, all right, well, hopefully that was informative, and we'll talk at you later.